Okay, hi. We're in our last segment, question and answer segment. So Becky and I are going to team tackle the questions.
Or fight it out.
Yeah. What if we don't agree?
Oh.
Wow, that would be terrible.
Then we have these witnesses.
That's right. We've always agreed all these years, though. Do you know how long Becky's been with us?
Oh dear. Please don't do that, because I came after I retired.
She came after she retired, and she's been here in her retirement for 31 years.
Yeah.
This is her 31st year coming up.
Hallelujah.
So we're going to start with a little bit of the detailed
It's a wonderful
explanation.
journey, and in terms of really, in terms of evaluation, I can't give an answer, and the reason is because it's very individualized. So suppose you come in with a young child and the young child doesn't want to sit there with me. Well, then we have to take a course different from I would be telling you now. Suppose the child is willing to sit with me but doesn't respond. And so then we take that course. See, in other words, there's a course that we take for each one. But let me tell you what is hopefully going to happen. One of the things that we hope will happen is that the child is made known to us, so that when we think of that child, or when you call us to ask about that child, we have in mind how that child thinks, how that child loves or does not know the Lord, how that child responds academically, how that child looks at authority. We have all of this in mind that comes to us through either just an interview kind of testing or a standardized kind of testing. Does that help at all? Because I could be more specific, but okay. Does that bring another question? Okay.
So don't go too far unless you like walking. So, and I want to say something about what Becky said. It's probably been the most sacred part of this ministry to me in all these years. We're starting our 35th year of the homeschool ministry, and just how God has met Becky, and on occasion when I've been doing the testing myself, He just opens our eyes and our hearts to your children, and we're asking them, what does 2 + 2 mean? And the Lord reveals that your child has a need in a certain area, and we'll suggest it, and the parents say, well, how'd you know that? And we just have to say, well, it seemed to appear that way when we're going through the testing. In terms of how we make application of that, the reality is, through championship education, you're going to have two things happening in terms of application. Of course, you're going to understand, on the one hand, that there's some basic academics that your child's going to be going through from K to 12 in terms of getting an essential education. Of course, the primary year is learning to read and write and do math, etc. And so those things will be laid out. But then the coaching and encouragement from us is trying to help you recognize that these are the things that you're doing, but how can you do this in the least intrusive fashion, the least classroom-oriented fashion? So that's part of our coaching. So if you'll take advantage of what we offer, when you come physically to our workshops, you get physical time to talk and discuss. You pick up the phone, you can make appointments with us anytime. And Becky's going to...
I was going to say, I don't know you personally, of course, but if you are a Christian and we are Christian, one of the very neatest things happens. We come to realize that God absolutely loves that child and wants that child to become everything that He had in mind for that child to become. So He works together with us. He reveals things to us. And then He reveals things to you that made what He revealed to us either not right or right, and then we move in that direction. It's a marvelous journey, really, of absolute dependence and trust, not being fulfilled in ourselves, but being fulfilled in Him.
So the picking up then, that kind of moves right into the next question about child-centered versus parental control. And I want us to understand we can solve that question instantly by saying Christ-centered, because he's the creator. He made all things, and Paul spoke of himself before he was in his mother's womb his mother's womb, the Lord had foreordained his life and his purpose and his goal. So we're not here by accident. We're here on purpose. And so the reality is, it's not about, I always try to leave the impression with my children, it's not that daddy's boss. Daddy's not boss. Daddy is under the boss. And the boss has told me, this is how you raise children because I want them to fear God. And so that's why we do these things. And when you get older and you're old enough to look back and say, wow, daddy was not really very smart, that's okay. But your job is never going to outsmart daddy. Your job is always going to be to teach your children how to pursue God. Because if you miss that chunk on the ladder, you're going to fall off the ladder. So reality is asking those questions, but that leads into this other question about, I'm going to get the application in a minute, but how do you work your schedule? And I just want to simply say this. Schedules are important, but the authority of who made the schedule is more important. The biggest problem that most people have is they try to live up to an abstract schedule that's not realistic. Now I have to tell you a bad story about my wife's and my homeschooling. We never seemed to escape this pressure for the early years at least. We always want to improve our schedule. We always want to do a better job. It seems like we've got a lot of kids with this and that. And so one September, my wife and I are sitting on the sofa and we're working on the schedule for the coming year. And my one son walks through the living room and has a door on each side. And he comes through and, what you doing, Mom and Dad? Working on the schedule. Why are you doing that? Every year you create a new schedule and you do it for about 2 weeks and then you go back and do what we always do. And we just looked at each other. Okay, we've been told. But it caused me to pause spiritually and think, okay, why is this the case? And what did he mean we do what we always do? So we had a brand new scheduling device set up. Okay, what do we always do? And we cheated. Now there's out there on the table, there's a yellow card with a hand and it's called Becky's 5 points or whatever. But I took Becky's hand and I thought, you know what? Life has a schedule. There are some things that we do every day. Now our schedule wasn't very sophisticated. We get up in the morning and we go to bed at night. Those are 2 points on our schedule. You know what the other 3 points are? We eat 3 times a day. So we have 5 fixed points on our schedule. I don't understand why it took me so many years, but I just suddenly had a liberty. Oh, wow. So, in between those fixed points of rising and going to bed and our 3 meals, there are opportunities for activity. What are the kinds of things that we've been doing in those? And you know what we did? We just tweaked them. This is the time for this, and we're going to do that. This is the time for this, we just tweaked it to make it realistic. And suddenly we had a schedule that was not beating us to death with failure. We just started doing what we were always doing, and we tweaked the reality, and it became much more effective in process. So be realistic with your schedule, and by that I'm meaning, what is hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is doing something so somebody outside your home is impressed. And when you try to live up to external standards that everybody else has, I've done this for 34 years, so I can tell you the truth. It's what happens. You back in your home, and all you can think about is that homeschool mom that you met at church or the other day, and she has it all together, and I'm never going to be good enough. I really like her, and I'll never forget one of our staff people one time forgot to tell a family that he was coming for a home visit. So he just showed up with no warning. It was a family that every time he went there, their house was in perfect order, and he was so impressed, and he'd always go back home from this family and sort of beat up his wife. How come someone... Well, he popped in unexpectedly, and the house was a disaster, like his home. And he suddenly realized, oh, you know what? It is kind of true. When we go out, we tend to improve our decorum to some benefit. So if you're comparing, this is a scriptural verse, 2 Corinthians 10. If you're comparing yourself with others, that's not wise. That's false comparison. You compare yourself to what God has given you to do. And you do that, you do it with all your might, and you trust the Lord. When you get back to the question then about balancing your brakes and what have you, what do you need? What's necessary? I think it was within the first year of our homeschooling, I sat my wife down and I said, you know what, honey, I think we're going to have a large family. We didn't have all 10 kids yet, but we were anticipating more than likely. I said, if we do what we've done this semester, if we try to do this to our homes, all we're going to be is a bus service. We're just going to be driving our kids here, there, and meeting the schedule, doing all this, because we're going to value everything outside the home higher than we value the home. So pay attention to what the home needs. If you get the philosophy that we're trying to encourage you to walk in, God invented the home. Home is where your child's going to learn to prosper. And inside the home, the kinds of training and educational tools that are helpful for a good foundation can be taught and can be achieved. But I want to say this, as it happens, you deal with, you asked me to repeat something that I said about a practical application. You make children capable of problem solving by working with you in the circumstances, then they begin to value the work, and they begin to take ownership of the work. And that attentiveness is going to cause them to be alert. I'm going to give you one little illustration. We didn't do a lot of field trips, but I did trust the Lord that when we had something come up that would be important, that we had to draw our attention to it. Well, in the morning, we're busy. We had a farm, we have chores to do, hubbub going on in the kitchen, children talking and being happy and whatever, and the radio's on. Why we had the radio on, I have no idea. But the radio's on, Christian radio station, and my one son walks through the kitchen and all this hubbub and noise, and as he's walking through the kitchen, he hears on the radio, it announced that Governor Schaefer was going to do a presentation at the Baltimore Trade Center with a gentleman from Japan that had more patents than Thomas Edison. But the thing he was going to demonstrate was a motor about the size of a 16-ounce can of Coke, a motor that runs totally on water. Well, in our curiosity cultivation that we did in our home, talking about how stuff works, I had told my son, you know, you can drive a car on water. You don't need gas. And he looked at me with suspicion, and then I explained it, electrolysis and stuff. So he started trying to design mechanisms for driving things on water. So he was into it. So when he walks through the room, and all that noise he hears about this special meeting going on, and he comes to me, Dad, can I go to the Baltimore Trade Center today? Governor Schaefer's going to present a special award to this guy, and he's got a motor that runs on water. I said, well, I've got home visits in Southern Maryland. I can't take you. Call Granddad. Granddads are good for something. See if he'll take you. So Granddad did. Granddad picked him up and took him, and my son was the only student in Maryland that attended an award ceremony. But why? Because the ownership of curiosity caused him to be attentive. And it wasn't like we were programming attentiveness in some diligent way. It's that the genuine vibration of attentiveness stirs up, and it creates discipline and planning, etc. Another illustration, he wanted to get his pilot's license before he was 16, which he did. In the course of that process, he wanted to raise dogs as a way of paying for it. The Lord gave him a dog, and she was going to have puppies, and he needed to build her a kennel. And I'm in the process of building a little addition onto our house for our church meeting. At the time, we were meeting at the house. And he comes to me and says, Dad, I need help building my kennel. And I realized he was upset with me because I wasn't taking child-centered time for him building the kennel. I said, son, I think you've just missed one shade of opportunity. Your job is to work with me. And as you work with me, you're going to learn stuff that you can apply yourself. So today's assignment just happens to be, son, we're going outside and we're going to put up the frame wall for the addition, just you, me, and your brother. So that's what we're doing. Let's go. So we went out and we built the front and the side wall, did the framing. I showed him everything I did. I love bragging. Look at this, you do it. And we're finished by 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. On a Saturday, I've got to wind down around 4 or 5 or my brain won't stop. I can't prepare for my Sunday sermon. So I shut down, and my son comes to me and says, okay, Dad, can I build the kennel now? I said, sure, go ahead. At 11 o'clock, he comes and shows me. Look, Dad, look. He built an entire doghouse and dog kennel from 5 o'clock to 11. And he said, Dad, everything you showed me today was what I needed to learn. And it was just that snapshot. So can we program it to be exact? No. But we can cultivate the power. When you look at that verse that I read, he'll show you greater things than these. The verse continues. And so you'll be able to do even more than your father showed you. That empowerment. So take what you have, make the most of that. That's the key. And recognizing that if you minimize your own life, you're shortchanging your children. And if you maximize what's going on outside, then you're robbing yourselves from that which God really has for them. And then the final question, what happens if it's not working? Well, the reality simply is this. If you're homeschooling under the auspices of making the most of your opportunity that God has for you, when circumstances arise that prevent you from homeschooling any longer, that becomes really obvious. We'll encourage you, we'll help you, we'll support you in every way that we can. But if you need to transfer your child to another educational setting, we'll help you do it, but the Lord will provide. It's not like this isn't like a life commitment that you're saying, I know what I'm going to do. When my wife and I started homeschooling, we didn't know what we were doing. We just said we'll go from year to year as time goes on. But we did learn one thing. Let's first worship God by respecting family because he invented family. And let education be secondary because the scripture warns me education with the wrong mindset causes me to be proud and an enemy of God. So I don't want to be an enemy of God. And I can trust God to make up those things. So he will. And my time is up. Thank you very much.